Thank you very much, Danielle. All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. I'm glad that I could do this. I'm happy to present. I hope I get back to Kansas City at some point if if the world improves, but we'll see how it goes. Uh, so, anyways, today I'm here to talk about Azure DevOps, and I do this talk because I deal with a lot of customers and clients as part of my job, and as part of my community work, and I find uh, the way that we build software and some of the tools and things are not as prevalent or not as familiar to database people as they are to application software developers. Even application developers sometimes don't always know all the different tools that are out there, right? But for the Microsoft stack, Azure DevOps is one of those very prominent and popular tools in the software world. It's becoming popular just software in general, even outside of Microsoft. But I did this talk to kind of walk you through some of the things that exist so that you're aware of capabilities and possibilities and how this might impact you as a database professional. So the agenda is kind of, I want to give a little overview and then dive into just some different areas that are a part of Azure DevOps. It is a consolidated solution for software development overall. And I'll really focus mostly on the boards, repos, and pipelines more than anything. The test plans and artifacts are less used by database people and less useful overall for them, but they're still a part of it, and we'll lightly cover those areas. So I appreciate the introduction from Daniel. My name is Steve Jones. I have been working with SQL Server a very, very long time. It wasn't available on Windows, actually. And in that time, I've been a DBA and developer at a variety of different companies and industries, and I've gone back and forth a little bit between those two roles. I've also been a manager and writer and speaker and other things as well. But I've had the chance to see how we build software and how we operate it, and some of the good and bad things over time that were a part of my professional life. And today, I mostly deal with it in terms of customers and clients of my employer, Redgate, that are trying to use our products, or they're trying to find different ways to better build software or better integrate the database into their software development pipeline. And so I see a lot of common things, but I also see, some very different things that work really well and don't work at all from different customers. I am an advocate for Redgate Software. As I said, they actually hired me, almost 14 years ago now, I think. And I do a lot of this stuff where I get to go and speak and talk to different groups as part of marketing, but also as part of a community support thing that Redgate does. And then I also do pre and post sales for customers, for all our various products. A lot of what this did came out of my founding of SQLServerCentral. I had a couple partners that we put together the site, almost 20 years ago now, which is crazy. Or I guess it is 20 years ago. And our goal was really, we had some success in our careers, and we wanted to help everybody else, just kind of be better. And we grew that into a community where, the goal continues to be to publish information and answer questions and help you be a better data professional. I've also been honored by Microsoft as an MVP, and then my contact information is here at the bottom. If you've got questions, please feel free to reach out. Or I'll pause at different places, and if you want to ask questions, chat them, raise your hand, whatever. However this works in the virtual world these days. Keeps changing. All right. So with that, what is Azure DevOps? So it's a lot of you have probably heard of TFS, or Team Foundation Server, which was very prevalent in the Microsoft. And that's really the first attempt by Microsoft to build a set of tools for a team. We've had Visual Studio forever and various tools, but TFS was really this idea that we wanted to build a server-based tool that everybody could connect to, and it can help them build software. What happened over time, as we've seen in our industry, is that the cloud becomes more important, and hosted software, software as a service or platform as a service, has become more popular. And Azure DevOps is the evolution of that. So TFS went online and it became Visual Studio Team Services. And then after a couple of years, it was renamed Azure DevOps. And actually today, Azure DevOps Server is TFS on-premise. So Azure DevOps is really a hosted solution, and it's also an on-premises server-based solution. It's a comprehensive development platform, really. It really is a platform. It's a set of tools, but they're all integrated together in a way that I think is fairly unique. I used TFS, in the 2000s, early 2000s, and I didn't love it. I thought it was a very clunky piece of software. Some of you may have similar experiences. And as they added some of the capabilities that we refer to kind of in DevOps, right, as this automation stuff, it felt like it was a bunch of disparate pieces of software until about 2015. And at that point, I think TFS made a huge leap forward. And shortly thereafter, they started calling it Azure DevOps, where it really became this cohesive solution. A big part of them driving it was that just like us, we build software for our clients. They are building software at Microsoft for developers, right? And what they found was that building a huge product like this across years really didn't work well. And they wanted to increase their cadence. And so one of the things that they actually did was, as they moved it to a hosted platform, they would release things more often in Azure DevOps, and then those things would make their way onto the on-premises server. And if let's see if this doesn't click this. Here is their timeline as an idea. So they've got this broken out into quarters of things that they're doing. But as you can see from their releases, right, they released in July, they released in June, May, a couple times in May. They've gone from, a 3 or 4 times a year, quarterly roughly, to even more often in terms of releasing certain pieces of software. And so they're using their expertise in building software to better build this tool. Just like a lot of us are trying to be better at building software for our customers and clients. We want to release things to our clients faster. We want to get feedback. We want to improve them. We want to fix bugs very quickly. It's a lot of the way of the world that we're trying to not only let software take over the world, but do a better job of producing it. Now, this is a comprehensive thing. There's some links in here. You can go look at what the marketing and all the descriptions are, but essentially it's a very agnostic platform in that it works with any type of application, any framework, any language, any platform, any cloud, anywhere. So there are people building mobile apps for iPhones, iOS. People are building Java apps that are going to run on Linux. People are building stuff for Unix. They're building Windows, of course. Really, Microsoft, this is, I think, one of those first areas where they decided to just be incredibly agnostic, and they built a ton of stuff for non-Microsoft software platforms. So not on Windows, not on, well, we don't have mobile Windows anymore, but not really with their languages such as C# or something. They get a lot of Java, they get a lot of Python, a lot of Go, a lot of other languages on the platform. And the whole idea here is that it's just trying to help you build software, giving you the ability to set up a process and handle your needs, but in a very lightweight fashion. And you'll see what I mean as I go on. It's also quite extensible, kind of like our mobile phones have these app stores, right? Google Play or the App Store from Apple or whatever. There's a huge marketplace that has all these add-ons to allow you to extend the platform really to meet any of your software development needs. As I mentioned, there's all these components that we'll look at in there, and then there's a marketplace. But the big thing, I think, is that they tried to make this fairly cost effective. So for a lot of things, you can get by with small teams and being free. Now, I don't know all the EULA stuff if you have a huge company and you have 20 teams of 5, but in general, you set up an organization, which is a group of people under an account, and you start using it. And it's fairly free to start. What they're really trying to do is, as you scale up, get you to pay more for some of the automation and compute things. And as an example, let me pop this page. So you can see for individuals, I can start for free and I get some hosted automation jobs, either from Microsoft or self-hosted. And I get a certain number of minutes where I can do stuff. So if you have an open source project or a hobby project or something, you can actually go pretty cheaply or free to get going. The only place I've actually ever paid for some of my community work and personal work is that there's times where I've tried to run multiple parallel jobs. So I have 2 pieces of automation running at the same time. And so I've had to pay for that. It's $40 if you want extra Microsoft hosted jobs, and $15 if you run them on your hardware itself. So those are there. Over for the server type of side of thing as well, right? It's free for some users. And then as you add people, it becomes more of a cost, right? but these are, the platform itself. Um, they don't limit a lot of stuff that you need, right? So they're not trying to nickel and dime you for different repos or how extensive your software system is. They really have gone user based, which is kind of what we've done at Redgate, and a lot of companies have gone, where we're just, rather than trying to track the resources you use, let's just charge per person. And if some people use a lot of resources, we don't care. Some people use a little bit, we don't care. It's just trying to make it simpler for you. And then there's similar pricing for Azure DevOps Server as well, if you want to look at that kind of thing. So, all right, let me go in and show a couple things. So you don't want to see my calendar, you want to see Azure DevOps. So here is my Azure DevOps when I look at this. So if I come up here and look at the URL here, right, this is dev.azure.com. And then there's my particular organization, which is listed over here on the side, and it's kind of listed here, where that's where I put all my projects. And then these items down here would be the different projects that I have in place. Okay. As you can see, I'm actually a part of a couple different organizations. So Foundry is a research arm at Redgate. They do some things. Sam and I were doing some demo stuff. So we wanted to share access to projects. So we joined each other's organizations as well. But essentially you're building projects under some sort of organization that you have here. If I were to go, let me do a incognito window. If I go without being logged in, I end up on this azure.microsoft.com page, where it kind of describes what's going on. It starts to give you the marketing things of what all these different items mean, right? And documentation, all that. The start free over here is for Microsoft account or a GitHub account. Microsoft owns GitHub, but they haven't integrated all the authentication stuff. So really you have two different ways of signing up and getting going. But like I say, this isn't provide a credit card and then you can go. It's absolutely free. So you can just join in and start building things. And so creating a project is fairly simple. Like if I click this button over here on the far right, it pops out this blade. And then I can say, I have a project, I have a description. Is it public or private? Public means that, like in GitHub, if you can anybody can go to URL being unauthenticated, they can see it. Private means that we choose who has access to your code, right? So if you care, you can make it private and public. They used to differentiate here and charge. They do less of that now. They don't care. And then I can choose my version control and my work item process or my methodology for going. Git and Team Foundation version control are my options here. TFVC is what a lot of you used in TFS. I don't find many people using this anymore, even if they've been using TFS for a long time. Most people have started to move to Git as the way of tracking versions. It's easier, especially in this remote world, where if I lose connectivity or something, I still want people to be able to work with version control and get things done. So Git has really been the protocol most people are using. I don't see a ton of people converting older projects to Git. Some, it's a lot of work for not a lot of benefit. I mean, if you know how to use TFVC, it works. But for new work, I would certainly use and plan on Git. And then they do offer you some different methodologies for building software if you follow one of those. If you don't, like I usually just stick with Agile for a lot of these because it's just simple and easy for me to understand at least. As I said here, these are my projects. I've got 2 in this organization. I actually have another account where I do a lot more stuff. But you can see that it's kind of, they built this responsive web page. These are all the different components that I want to talk about a little bit that I can drop into and pick if I want to. It's kind of a standard piece of software that just lets me do a lot of different things, right? I've got the my stuff here, my pull requests, my work items, because in a team, those things often matter. When I come in, I may want to see the status of stuff for myself. Down here in this corner is the organization settings. I point that out because when I first started going, I'd see documentation. It's like, go to org settings and do stuff. And I'd be in this screen and my eyes were all up here at the top. And I would never see this tiny little thing in this corner. So if you're wondering, it's way down here. And then up here in this upper right-hand corner, right, I have my account stuff here. This is where I do some of the security items. And then this is the marketplace. And that's the other thing that I wanted to show you. So if I come in here, what I'm going to do is actually pop this in a different window. The marketplace it's a consolidated thing for Visual Studio Code, Azure DevOps. I don't even know what subscriptions are. That's new for me. But companies can put all sorts of extensions that work with both the online platform and the on-premises server that are useful for software development, right? So like there's this Slack one, which allows you to monitor stuff in a Slack channel, right? It's an integration between Azure DevOps and Slack. There's all sorts of stuff here that, if I wanted to go through and look, for example, maybe I'm doing something like feature flags. There's all of these companies that have put things in here. For example, LaunchDarkly is a company I've worked with a little bit. They've got this way to manage feature flags at scale across a large application. And while many of us don't think feature flags are that big a deal, at any size, they really are cumbersome, especially when I don't want to roll everything out to everybody at once. Keeping track of this stuff is important. So I can pick this and say, I want to add this to my account. And I say, get it free. And then it'll bring me over to this download area where I can pick an organization in which to install it, because these aren't available by default. Some of them do cost money. Or I can download the extension for Azure DevOps Server here. Okay. Let's leave, we don't want to do that. If I come back here, and what if I were to say paid? Well, there's one in the feature flag area here that's paid. There are plenty of just generic ones that are paid. For example, if you really like Gantt charts and you want that added to your burn down chart, to keep track of stuff and who's doing what and all of that. If you want some of this AI stuff, there's a lot of stuff in here. There's also a lot of these that say free trial, right? So here's an report on your work, your tickets and things that you might be working on. And so they have a pricing model here that they'll tell you this is what it costs for us per month, per year, per users, et cetera. How do you buy it? Add it in there. Okay. 30 days free trial. But there are things like, well, that's bad. Oh, you know why? Because it said any. Let's do that. This used to always be here, and now they've started to pop it on and off in different sites. I don't know why and how they decide on that, but in any case, all these say free, right? But if I come in here, this is a separate tool, which is licensed per user, right? And so these are, the add-on itself is free, but like these will say, this is subject to the terms of the Redgate EULA, which is a charge item. So adding this to Azure DevOps doesn't cost anything, but the use of it actually is. And so, not to bang on Redgate or anybody else, but for a lot of these, it doesn't cost you to add it to Azure DevOps, but it may be governed by a charge in some other way, because this is a service or it's software that exists maybe outside of Azure DevOps as well. So don't be misled by all these saying free. They may actually require your company to pay something if you're going to use it in your process. They're usually free to add in here and try, though, and even the ones that cost money have some sort of trial. So I urge you, before you get upset at not being able to do something or trying to build your own, come to the marketplace and look, because there are literally thousands of these, right? If you look, that's 1,600 overall, especially in the database world, right? There's Oracle, there's Synapse, there's Entity Framework, there's Redgate, there's all sorts of things that allow you to automate part of your software development process, whether that's writing the software. Here's one that enables TDE on all databases. There's just a ton of things that help you build software faster and at a higher quality. All right. Any questions? Anybody? I don't see anything in chat, so I'm gonna keep going. Please feel free if you do have questions, drop things in there. So I'm gonna kind of walk through some of the things that are going on here. And I'll start with boards. And boards are really work item tracking. That's really what they're designed to do. You can do Kanban boards, you can do lists, there's queries, there's all sorts of things that help you track what work needs to be done, who has done what work, what's the status or state of that work. And this goes all the way through the software being deployed to some other production system, right? Some sort of release, whether that's a mobile phone, a server, whatever it is. It's allowing you to just understand the state of your software, backtrack, check history, and just have a better view of what code has been written and where that is actually being applied. And so I'll give you some examples of what this really is. So if I come back here, I'll do this demo project because I use this to show different things. I start with an overview here that's, let me navigate slightly. This is the overview here. Here are boards as well. And then once I've picked something, I go kind of into this sub menu of things that are out there. Actually, I should have talked about the overview, but I'll come back to that in a minute and show you some things. Here, when I've gone into boards, this is the top level item. This is the highlighted item, which is where I am, which is work items. And you can see that's just a list, over here on this side, right? It's just a big list of things. And then they've also overloaded boards here again as a sub menu item, which is crazy. These marketing people make me a little insane with this. But then they have these other items as well that exist out there. So work items are what you expect. Like I created this work item today just for linking purposes where, I assign it to myself. If I have Grant and Kathy in this project, so I could assign it to somebody else. We could have a description of it if we cared. We could set up criteria, which, customers, clients, project managers often like to do. Developers use this certainly to see what's going on. And we could have a discussion if we want to say, so, this is the initial look at boards, right? Any type of stuff I put in here, I can save it. And we've got a discussion that kind of tracks what's going on rather than this being an email or Slack or somewhere else where it could get mixed in with other things. Whatever's germane to this, in this case, user story is shown here. The way you work with it, standard kind of platform stuff that, I can pick an item and edit it and save it or whatever. Over here is where it gets interesting that I can link in other items here. Okay, so this first part is development work. So in this case, you can see that I've actually done a few different commits here that get added to this particular item. So if I'm trying to figure out how's people written code, it's here. And then I have child items here as well that are linked down here that might be, these are in fact tasks related to this story. And so as I deploy stuff, I can see if my code is actually making it out to QA, is it making it out to production? Is this actually covered in what's being done? And for developers, they can make sure that I've linked everything back to a piece of work that's being tracked. So I know that it's, it's being appropriately costed or triaged or whatever software development things matter for you, you can do it. Okay. And I can link things into this item as well. Over here, I can look at the history of what happened, if we're trying to figure out what's going on, or if I'd have added these links in there, you can see where, if I had parents or children or anything else, I've got all of these items in here. Okay. Every one of these is kind of linked by this number up here. And that's where I can do these links. And I'll show you as I go through that, I can link stuff from all different places of what's going on. Okay. Work items are kind of a list, that I can move the stuff around if I want, right? Delete them, I have a recycle bin, all the stuff we expect. Boards are where I do more of my work. And by boards, I mean the Kanban board below the boards menu item. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the post-it method of, tracking work, write it on a post-it and send it, put it on a list, and we know whether it's new or active or blocked or resolved or closed or whatever. These items are, or these boards rather, are customizable, so I can do whatever I want. I can hide stuff if I am trying to just look at one thing. In this case, I can see there's child items, and I can add some if I wanted to, which would be to overview, which I didn't do. And so now I've got another item that I could link in there and deal with, right? And then, as with many of the things we're doing, right, that I can drag and drop these things over as I'm doing work, and it's updating on everybody's board and everybody's status, so they know whether or not something is done or not, or I think it's done, or it's closed out and verified, or whatever your methodology is. I have the ability to kind of track what's going on, and I can just mark these things as complete or unmark them as needed. I actually did a build test earlier, so that's there. And I didn't talk about the overview, so we'll leave that out there. Okay. And each one of these has their own number as well. So this is in fact 83, right? So it's tracking, it's unassigned, but I could pick it and say, I don't want to give it to Kathy or Grant, because then they'll get an email and they'll be like, why is Steve giving me work to do? But I can decide whatever is important, right? And I can change what these things are. This is going to take a long time, so we'll delay that a little bit and do whatever I want, right? And maybe I want to link it to, a commit or something else, or a branch anywhere else, or I can do it later when I'm doing the actual work. I can say I'm actually linking to this particular item. Backlogs allow me to kind of throw stuff back there that say this is stuff that I want to do, later. I think all this stuff is kind of living on a backlog for me. But for those of you that build software, right, we sometimes care about seeing current work and future work, and deciding what sprint or what timeline of work we want to put it in. Sprints would be, if I'm trying to plan future work, a lot of times, what I would typically try to do is, you can see I can add a new sprint here. So this would be the KC Saturday, which will come at some point in the future, right? We'll say it's hopefully not this year, but let's aim for September 10th of next year, right? It'll be that weekend. So I can add another sprint, and I can start putting work into this one, and you can see I've got some amount of work in the future work, some in the KC SQL Saturday. Well, no work here, but I can start to then manage my work and say, what do I care about? What needs to be done, or what am I deferring to the future? This is all typically similar stuff. There's queries that I can set up, and so I can have mine or others. So maybe I want to know what are all the bugs, for things that are for bugs, and I don't care about the state. And so what I could do is save this as, something, and I can run it and then see what items are there. So there's 2 items that are tagged as bugs. When you're in a team environment, some of this stuff starts to make sense, because rather than this list of, I don't know how many items I have here, it doesn't tell me. It's a relatively small number of items. What is that, 50 items? You could have thousands of items. For example, there's a large airline that uses this that they were a client of ours, and they showed us some of this, and they have 1,000 developers building software, and they have dozens of major projects going on, and thousands of work items all the time. So being able to filter these down and run queries to say, what are my bugs, or what things are doing in next week, or whatever type of thing I need, become really important. So queries make that easier for me to do that. And then delivery plans allow me to kind of visualize the work that I want to get done in a release and put it down. I haven't created any. This is actually fairly new in Azure DevOps. So it's really a management kind of tracking tool for you. All right, I'm going to actually go back and talk about overview before I go back to the next part of this. So if there's questions, please feel free to pop them up. But let me go back to the overview here. So this is the main item. You can see I have some description here. This is actually a file. This is the path that exists in this repo. Okay. And then you can see I'm using Git here. It lets me know. What this is actually do is rendering the markdown from that file. And by default, this is just readme.markdown is what is shown here on this main page. But this gives me just this view of some stats, who my people are in this project, and that kind of thing. Really where this becomes valuable is in the dashboards. I have a lot of teams that use this extensively where they're trying to figure out what's going on. So for example, I have a CI process here. You can see I have a couple failures, right? This failed just an hour ago, this failed yesterday, and then some successes. And so I have the ability to kind of at a glance see what's going down. My burn down is not very good because this is a demo project. It's not very, and if I care about other things, right? Like maybe I care about, you know, I don't know what's good here. Lead time will be no good at all. Maybe I want to have something in here to just create new work items quickly if somebody wants to do that, or I want, is there a release thing here somewhere? Release. Maybe I want to do releases, and I say that I care about my release pipeline. Okay, and so I've only got one here. Let's save it. Done. And I've got a dashboard. And I could have multiple dashboards if I want, but this allows me to, at a glance, see what's important to me in my project. And you can share these with other people, or you can have your own ones that make your job as a software developer easier in life. All right, so you can see I care about releases, what's going on. You know, I care about builds usually. Maybe I want to have a quick way to enter work items when I come here rather than going to boards and trying to do a bunch of stuff. I just want to be able to type up a bunch of stuff very quickly. So that's really the overviews. The wiki allows you to publish documentation out. And so essentially what you're doing is you pick a location. So that's editing the file. I don't want to do that. I think if I create a new project wiki, I can just create that. Or if I go to publish code as wiki, oops. Let's try this again. I don't want to do that. Publish code as wiki. I can pick a repository and then a branch and then a folder. In my case, I made a docs folder and I put all these files in there. So I'll show you that when I go talk about repos. But essentially then for me, right, when I look at my wiki, I can put in these docs, and as people update the repo with code, you know, they say that I'm going to update this file. It just gets published here as a document that others can look at. And these are hot linked, right? Because it's just markdown. I can decide how this works. I don't have navigation back to the main page, but I have the ability to kind of make this an interactive document, and people can add comments then rather than overwriting my document file. And I can update documentation or, you know, respond to a comment or anything else. All right, overview. I did that, and I did boards. Any questions? I think all that stuff is somewhat self-explanatory. So let's go on to repos, which is for code. This is where I think it starts to get more interesting. This is really a version control system. You know, as I showed you when we set up a new project, I can choose Git or TFVC as the interface or protocol that I use to actually connect. Okay. Git has really, like I said, everybody is using Git. I just don't see a lot of people doing that. But what's nice is it integrates all the things that I want to do with code, with you know, branches and history and looking at diffs and then tagging other people for things, and then having pull requests that make it easy for me to do code reviews and ensure that somebody else is looking at my code. It's not just me pushing everything out there. Okay? There's great search in there. There's lots of policy and security stuff I can do as well. But it's really, it centralizes a lot of the work we do. It's no better or worse than GitHub or Bitbucket or any other thing you do. But if I have work items and things here, it's nice to have it integrated very tightly in there. So let me pop over to repos. So you can see a couple things. As I've been going through here, I have my organization, my project, the area where I am, and then the sub area or menu or sub menu. And then here I actually have my repo. So as I'm going around in all of these different areas over here on the side, that's breadcrumbing me at the top. Here I actually have 2 repos, but I could create another one or import one or whatever I want to do here. But this is just a folder structure for code, right? Here's my docs folder where I've got these files. And if I look at one, this is what's, what I put in there. And if I wanted to change that, right, I could certainly say another section, right? And if I wanted to, I could go home and say, if Markdown, I could do that. And like any other file and any other piece of code I have, I'm actually committing something here. So, right, so demo, right? Am I committing it to a branch or not? Am I linking to work items, right? So was it 72 as a KC item? So I can link it to a particular item that I'm working on. What was 80? Let's talk about overview. We'll add it in there as well. So I can link to those items, right? And now I've just committed a file, right? I've made a change online, just like I can do in GitHub or Bitbucket. I could have done it on my local machine and just pushed it up here as well, just to show you that that actually exists, right? This is really important. We added that. We added the hot link in there and it goes back. That took effect right away. It was there. But it's the normal type of stuff that we would do. For example, in here, I've got code. So here I've got stored procedures, right? My stuff is organized according to this project in a certain way, but here's all the code I have. For example, I've got this, which one did I add? I thought I added a proc here, maybe I didn't. Here's one that I've got here that I've committed actually. Let's make a change. Let's call it on result. I can commit that. I'm not going to, I should have a work item, but I'm not doing it because I'm hurrying. And I've made a change, right? And it's said I've committed something here. I can create a pull request right from here where it's integrated. In this case, it was in the same branch, so it doesn't help me to do that pull request. If I had done it in a branch, it would. But I have the ability to keep all this integrated, right? It's always breadcrumbed where I am. I have the ability to see the history of this thing over time, what I've actually done, what things have changed or not changed. In this case, it's actually got automation in place. That's what this status is showing. Here it's showing this was part of a pull request that included a bunch of other changes as well. And the nice thing about having all of this here is that it's linked together. So I could go back and examine the pull request that this was a part of. Up here, I can see what the status is. If I click on any of these, I'll see the files and commits that are there. I see the history of what happened in there. Over on this side, I see the work items that are related. I see who's there as a reviewer, or I could add somebody. Having all this in place means that as I'm trying to backtrack or remember what I did, I'm context switching. Somebody's asked me a question. Maybe I'm tracing down a bug. I have the ability to do all of this stuff in one single location, which is incredibly handy. Those of you that build software and may have to go to 2 or 3 places that, maybe I have to go to Slack to check on what somebody said about it. Maybe I have to send somebody an email or do a chat. Maybe I have to look in Jira or some other ticketing system. Moving between applications is cumbersome and it's time consuming. Here I have the ability to keep it all together. And maybe more importantly, have the ability to quickly link and open things in new windows. So when I see something and I don't want to do it, I don't want to lose where I am right now, I have the ability to pop this open and say, what actually was this thing that happened? And what work is this related to? Or what's my acceptance criteria? Or what things do I care about for my particular item? All the stuff I would expect, right? I get a list of commits, I get the graphing that you normally see in Git tools. I can see what's been going on. I can certainly see branches here. So you can see I've got different branches in place for stuff. And then I've got pull requests that exist. And so here's actually one that I created earlier as getting ready here, where I said, hey, I added a new file. If I look here, you can see that this was all an add, right? Because it's green. So I don't have a diff, but if there was a change, I'd see that. If there had been updates, I'd see it here, but there's only one commit there. So I have the ability to ask a question, say, is this needed? Right? That would go off to whoever was in charge of this. In this case, it goes to me because I did all this work. But I certainly could say, I want to assign Kathy to review this thing, right? And I would get the ability to see, to tag Kathy in here, and then she would get an email that say, this is something she has to do. I'm not going to do that. Matter of fact, I'm going to just approve it myself and then complete it. For those of you that do software development, I have multiple choices in how I merge stuff forward here. Oops. What these are isn't really important, right? Which one I pick just depends on what I'm trying to do and what my team is doing. But they've tried to give me flexibility to match the style of working for my team. I could automatically complete things or delete the branch when I'm done. Some people do this. I tend not to do this because sometimes I have to go back and update this branch again. I have to fix my code. And so I want it to come back in. I could customize the message. This is the default message, but I could change that if there's something I should be doing. And I could just mark things as complete. I'm just not going to do any of those things and just let this complete. It'll merge the code together. So that was that get to. And so once this is merged, if I were to go to files and I'm in the master branch here, and I go back down into that code, that's what I was looking for earlier. That get to procedure is now listed here, right? And you can see the history is that was just added, right? So there's no comparison or anything else that I can do, no blame ability. This is just one thing that I've added in here. All of this is fairly standard version control stuff. So if you're not used to version controlling code as part of your database development, anything you learn tutorial wise for Git would apply here. This is all the same stuff. It's just they've given you an interface here to manage things on the platform. I could do all of this stuff in my local on my local machine, and I would get it. For example, I think if let's come in here, if I do a git status, it says there's nothing there. I don't think that's right. Oops. Fetch. So there's other branches in there. Yeah. So if I pull down, in fact, what you can see is that I updated this file. This was in that pull request. And then there's something else I must have done as well since I last did this. This stuff is all on my local machine now. So all the normal Git stuff that I might do here is reflected and duplicated up here. And as I push changes into Azure DevOps, it's tracking it all. And when I'm in a team, being able to see where my code is and what state it is, or maybe what branches are different, becomes really valuable to me, especially as a database developer, because what I might want to do is somebody might be working in this feature branch, okay? And this file actually isn't there, which is why I'm getting a message. But what I might want to do is compare the work here with what's in the main branch of development and just try to make sure that there's no conflict. If Grant is doing something in this feature demo branch, what I might want to do is just check that he's not touched a file that I'm going to touch as part of my work. Right? It's one of those ways that I could go ask Grant, but I have to interrupt him. I have to catch him. He might have to read an email or a message or whatever. Being able to do it all online here and having this integrated is valuable. This is the same as GitHub or anywhere else, so I'm not trying to say it's any better. But the fact that it's integrated all of a sudden with the boards and things, having all the work integrated and then integrated with the automation is incredibly valuable. All right. So that's kind of the project work part, the project code part. Now let's look at automation. So pipelines are the automation thing. And just like with boards, their pipeline is overloaded, the word is overloaded. But the area itself is for doing the continuous integration, continuous development, and then integration with other software packages. That's really what this section is for. It's no different than many other products. So for continuous integration, which is the idea of putting all the code together, compiling it, and testing it, there are lots of other products that do this. TeamCity does this, Jenkins does it, Hudson, Cruise Control, Bamboo. There's just a ton of products that do continuous integration. Microsoft bought a company years ago and then added their kind of tool in to TFS, and now they've enhanced it into this Azure Pipelines area. Release management is this idea of having a process of getting the bits from one machine to the other one reliably and repeatedly. Okay? Again, Microsoft bought a company that had a really clunky release system, and they've enhanced it and made it a really nice release system now that can publish and push bits to any device, platform, cloud, anything you need. Okay? They, as I mentioned, they support lots of different platforms and they support different OSs. So in the world today, we have Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. Unix exists to a lesser extent. Mainframe systems exist to a lesser extent, right? OS 360, that kind of stuff exists to a lesser extent, but they do support all of these different OSs and automation, and they'll support any of the other OSs for targets as well. And essentially what they're doing is they're using agent machines or virtual machines to do the work that needs to be done in automation. Just like for some of us, we might have a build server on premises. This is acting as our build server here, and we could have the machines that do the work be Microsoft hosted agents in the Azure cloud, just VMs that spin up in the cloud, or they could be machines on premise that communicate with Azure and do the work we tell them to do. Okay? It's up to us. There's a lot to that, but I don't want to spend too much time there. There's lots of third-party enhancements available here. So all that marketplace stuff that I showed you earlier really comes into play here. So let's look at pipelines. So again, pipelines is a major section here, and then it's also overloaded as the first item, which I don't know what to say. It is what it is. Okay, and then these are the rest of the items down here that make up the pipelines group, the pipelines area. Okay, here are my pipelines recently run. As a matter of fact, you can see it just failed. But if we look here, I've been talking for, I don't know how long, an hour here, or we've been online for an hour. Here are all the runs that have occurred. So this occurred while I was talking, this occurred while I was talking, and this occurred while I was talking. So part of the nice thing about continuous integration is as I make changes in code, it's automatically testing what's going on. So I updated that get one, and this worked just fine, right? Everything was green. It went through all these steps. For the get two, it didn't go through all these steps. And as a matter of fact, if I were to look at this, what it takes me to is this history. So here are all my steps, right? Going top to bottom in time. I'd see how long they took. Well, the checkout worked, this worked, the build failed. So what happened in here? Here's actually the log. There's a schema validation that failed. And so what I guess is somewhere in my, let me do it in a different window, in my code, I think I deliberately broke something, but let's see. I could just search, I guess, but let's just do this. The easiest way is say, it didn't merge. Oh, I'm in the demo branch, sorry. What does this code look like? So something failed. Well, I don't know what failed there. Should be valid. Create procedure. Let's see, maybe let that run and see if it happens. In any case, my pipeline or my continuous integration here is all of the checks that I'm running against my code to independently validate and verify my code is running. And you can see now this just kicked off. If I look at the definition of what I've done there, what I've got is these tasks, which are the steps that I follow to build software. And I can define this however I want. In this case, the pipeline has its name. It has a pool of agents. In this case, these are agents from Microsoft. I don't have any private local agents for now. In this case, I'm building on 2016 Visual Studio 2017, but I could build in other platforms if I cared about it. The source is my source control. Where am I getting my code from? And then this pipeline is what is going to happen. So in this case, this is the agent that's going to pick up this work. So it's a virtual machine for Microsoft. I don't have any parallelism down here. I'm using whatever the pipeline has got set up. I don't have any demands, which would be like, maybe I would say I need SQL tool belt to exist, right? Maybe there's a demand that I have. And then the agent would have to have this installed or this requirement met to actually pick up this work. Because I could have, I mean, I have customers with literally hundreds of agents, and some of them can do certain work and some of them can't do certain work. So maybe I would have something in here. And then I have these steps of things that I do. And these are all just tasks that I've picked. So if I click the plus, by default, when I start, I have an empty job normally. But I could say there's all these things that are doing. So maybe I need to build a virtual machine image, right? And if that's the case, then I would need to now, figure my Azure subscription, the disk image name, right? Where is it? All of the configuration items that matter. Or maybe there's just ad hoc stuff that I need to do. Like I need to run PowerShell. And so I can add something in here and say, this is a PowerShell script that I'm going to run, right? Maybe it's inline, or maybe it's stored in my code in my repository somewhere. But I have the ability to customize how we build software. And really what this is a list of the manual steps you would do to build this software yourself. And all we do is we codify it with a series of tasks, and then we execute it every time we need to build it. For example, like if I wanted the Redgate tools, I can see the list of the tools that are available. These are the ones that are in my environment. These are in the marketplace, right? So I'd have to get it for free, right? Subject to the EULA. But I can set these up. I can do variables. For example, if I had a password variable like I needed, I would say this is the password, and it was 1234. Please don't use that. I would say this is a secret, so I would then hide it. And then in my task, if I had a parameter somewhere, I don't have a good place to do this, do I? Well, here, I could say I want to use this, this variable in my code somewhere. And this is what I would put it in there. And this would get tokenized and replaced out when it actually runs. So I could have variables that I've set up that other developers could then use in this pipeline as they add tasks or change things. I'm going to discard that stuff because I don't want to explode anything. But then I have the ability to set this up. This, in fact, is set up for continuous integration, which means that whenever I make code changes, it runs. I could batch changes. So if there's a bunch of commits I'm doing and there's a build running, and I don't want to run a build for every change, maybe I want it for, this takes 10 minutes. So if I make 4 commits, just run those all at once. I can do that as well. I can limit to branches, that kind of stuff. I can schedule or whatever I care about. There's various options that I might worry about here. And then there's a history of how I've actually changed this pipeline. So as I've done things over time, I can track it. So if in fact something breaks, right, my pipeline breaks because a developer decided to change the way it works, I can see what happened here. And then I kind of have the ability to see what's different about these different tasks. Okay. They've tried to make it really easy for me to make changes, set this up in a lightweight manner, and then run it. I can queue builds if I actually made a change, like if I said, let's do that PowerShell one again. If I add this at the end, I said this is inline. Notice I have the ability to save in queue here, or just save it, whatever I want to do. And then it would just run another build for me. And then, like I said, I have all the history of, let's leave because I don't care about those, of what's going on. And I don't know what I broke in here, but it doesn't really matter. This one worked, right? And I can see not only the status, how long it took, but I can also actually get the artifact. So in this case, I'm actually producing a NuGet package here as part of this. And I can just click it and you can see it just downloaded, right? And then I have the ability to see anything that I produced. And so in this case, what this actually produces is a look of the code that's out there. So there's some scripts back there. And then I have all of the stuff that I've done. So like I've been looking at store procedures. If I want to see what was actually going to be deployed, right, I could actually see that in this artifact. Same thing if I was doing a .NET app, I would have DLLs and exes and all the stuff could be output as a NuGet or a zip file or whatever. But I have the ability very quickly to kind of track back what's going on. Like I can see what work was covered in this particular build, right? What things were happening in there, okay? If I actually had the testing in here and stuff, I would see the results. So I don't have any in there in this particular thing. And then if I actually had any releases, I would see them here. And so if I actually go back, let me go down here somewhere. I don't have a release. Trying to just think, when did I do a release? Maybe this one has one. Yes. So this is actually links down to release that went to QA, went to staging, and it's waiting on an approval to go to production. Right? But it's all linked together, forward and backward here, right? As I start with a work item and I do code, now it's linked to the automation and it'll be linked to the releases as well. Environments are ways for me to set up different places that I might try to deploy for. I don't use these a lot in the database world. They tend to be more for web type environments or thick clients that have to deploy out, like in a blue-green environment. There's might be something I do there. Releases are the area where we decide to move stuff out to production. So very similar to the build process. You can see I've got a release, which is named here, and then I've got all these releases that have taken place over time. And you can see the status in here of what's going on. If I look at this, it looks very similar to the build process when I get to the tasks, but I also get this pipeline view of how do I deploy things. And so in my case, I've linked these stages together so that if I look here, it says after the stage QA release. So it's linked after, okay? I could say that, you know, one of these goes after both, right? In this case, you can see it's checked for both. Or I could have either or, you know, so if I had, let's change this one to say, sorry. If it didn't have to go after staging, you said visually, I could see, well, once it's gotten through QA, I could just release to production. I don't have to go to staging, which is not what I want as a DBA, right? So, and I don't want it to say it could go only after staging. I want it to kind of go both, just in case, you know, somebody has the ability to jump here. Like, what if this wasn't set up? What if this didn't say that? I don't want this type of environment either. I don't want you to be able to go to QA or staging and then go to production. You know, what I really want to make sure is that everything flows appropriately. And this can happen very quickly. I mean, literally, when I do details about how this process works, I'll release it through here in 5 minutes between all these stages. Okay. As you can see here, I have the ability to do all sorts of other stuff that are in here. Approvals, I have post approvals as well that exist out here. And then I have the artifact. This is actually coming out of the CI process. So I'm actually taking a build there. I could say I'm building out of multiple places. So where am I getting my artifacts from? You know, maybe I have, in this case, I have another artifact there. And so maybe I'm trying to grab a second artifact that I could use in my builds as well. Those artifacts when I click here or go into tasks, these artifacts are the things that would then be used in the tasks. And this area looks just like the build area because these are the same tasks. I just pick and choose the ones that are appropriate here. So I could do build tasks here if I wanted, but really there are more likely deploy tasks that I want to do here. Like I want to run something in Azure. I want to run something in AWS. I want to deploy to Kubernetes or whatever type of thing I'm trying to do. These are the tasks that exist that I can choose. And again, there's some in the marketplace that I could add in here as well to say, do the things that I need to do to release software. As with the builds, I have variables here. In this case, I do have a password already set up in there. I have options, integrations for things. I have retention policies. All the kind of management stuff that helps me build software exists here. Those are the most useful for databases. I'm going to leave that. In the library, I have the ability to do variables that would work across all my pipelines. So if they're common types of things like passwords to production systems or paths, email server names, various things that might be part of my deployments, I can actually set up a group and then use those in different pipelines that are out there. Task groups kind of allow me to set up a series of things that I want to include in a build or in a release. So in this case, I created this group that says, I'm going to run a command line, I'm going to run this Redgate thing and a PowerShell thing. And then I have the ability to manage it here, right? Kind of like modular code, like this is a stored procedure for me. And then I can include it into my other pipelines if I want. And so then the variables and things, I could have something in here, like here, maybe I had a variable name. So this would be $project as the path as something maybe I did. And so then this would get picked up in the build or release side, whatever variable I had for project would be used there. So I have the ability to kind of make generic code here, which is really nice because what I find is the way we build software is very similar, but I might want different pipelines for different purposes. And so having the task group here is useful. For example, I might have a build that runs what I need to run, but I could run it in 3 different pipelines, one for Linux, one for Mac OS, and one for Windows. Right? And then I might have variables that I use for the differences in those platforms, but the tasks are all the same. I think that's especially important when you get to .NET Core and PowerShell Core, the ability to just have a group of tasks. I haven't done a lot with deployment groups. These are, as it says, a logical group of target machines. In the database world, we don't do that, right? Because we typically deploy to a database and each one is its own thing. I think if you had sharded out things where I'm deploying to multiple clients, this might become useful, but I don't know. This is more aimed at web servers. And so I'd be nervous about using this for databases, honestly, but your mileage may vary. Okay. All right. So that's automation, pipelines, questions. I don't see anything.
So I do have one, Steve.
Sure.
Let's hypothetically say, so once you've gone from maybe from not an integrated style of DevOps, for an Azure using these pipelines and stuff and all of the stuff you just shared with us, what would you say could be a ballpark from a regular shop to going to this as a time savings or a efficiency savings? What would you say could be some things? Think of it from the perspective of I need to sell this to a client to be able to switch to this.
Right. So the selling points to me are all the time that we spent context switching, trying to research things and gathering information from different applications. Right. If I've got so I'm not a big fan of change for change's sake. So if I have things set up where we keep track of code and somebody sends us tickets and we fill them out and all that works, don't change, right? But if we do a lot of stuff through email and Slack and we're going back and forth often, that's where I think this becomes valuable. And for me, what I would probably start with if I was doing it is I would come to repos and I would say, we're just going to stick our code in here. And whatever process we use for tracking work, we'll still do. And whatever we do for deploying work, we'll still do. And then what I would probably start to do is then add in boards and go, rather than you punching in the item somewhere else, let's just punch it in here, because this starts to become really quick for people to just go, I want to do this, especially internal software. You have clients that they can just go, I just need to make a request, and then somebody will look at it and they'll put it into work, because it's easy for them to use this, right? Like this is similar than a lot of systems, right? Or it's equivalent. But then for developers to then be able to go, I'm in here, right? And I want to make a change, and I can very quickly go, yep, this change linked to that piece of work. And so that's what I would start to sell them, is that we can save some of the time we spend on communicating with other people, right? The automation stuff comes later. That's where I would sell that later and say this is a future thing, right? Like the reason I set up demos is because a lot of times we're trying to show them where you can get to, right? That is, as I make a change, I can fix something. As a matter of fact, I wonder if I can just fix this by, I'm going to delete that file. This is how you should fix most code, by the way.
Just delete it.
Is just go, yeah, I'm just going to delete that. Right. I'm going to commit that. Let's see if that solves the problem. If you delete data, it fixes a lot of problems too, by the way. Did you know that? If you truncate table,
Yeah.
Queries run really fast.
Queries run really fast. You only have one other problem after that, and that's usually just updating a resume, which.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But, I deleted this thing, right? You can see I did it now, and there's a build in process right now. All right. So it's going to go through and say, is that actually going to fix this problem? Right? Rather than doing it on production, of course, right? I deleted it in dev, put it in code, right? It's checked out the code. So this is the Git stuff I would run normally myself, right? To just do Git. This is just a silly batch file. But then what it's going to do, it's going to continue on and run through the rest of this process, unless I turned off the pipeline. Maybe I broke something, but no, it's still running. The selling point really is that it smooths the path of building software, and it saves you time. Does it save you enough time? That I don't know. For customers that are starting to get into the database automation, I'm always like, build a test project and understand how this stuff works first, so that you can take 5 minutes at lunch and try something. And if it doesn't work, you just go on with the rest of your day. And if it does work, then you learn something. But I never say just move, right?
Right.
So if you have something in place, I wouldn't, but this is nice and integrated. And so even like going to GitHub, and then maybe I have to go to Jenkins to see if it's building, or maybe I have to then go somewhere else to see if it's released in Octopus Deploy. It's cumbersome and hard, and it's less about you, and it's more about when Daniel moves to the Philippines and the next 5 people get hired, how hard is it for them to understand how this stuff works? Right. And this makes it super integrated, so that people pick it up very quickly. And like I said, Fortune 100 companies, that their pipeline, when they get here and they look at this thing, this list of tasks is like 80 things, or the release thing is like 80 things, right? Because it's, you get a token for a secret, go run a security scan, go notify somebody, right? All these steps that we follow that as humans, we sometimes forget, but as the machine, it follows through here every time. As a matter of fact, in that release, this release 8 is still sitting here waiting for me to approve it. I thought I had a timeout at a day, but maybe not. So I would have to then come in here and say, looks good. Well, if I didn't really check this, later on, this would say Steve approved it. As a matter of fact, do I have one that's went to production? I don't know if I had an approval in this one. I think this was before I put an approval in. Yeah. But it's logged to say who did what where, right? It's really hard to convince management this isn't about blame, and really DBAs and developers too. But most of the time, it's about, let's just figure out what broke so we don't break it again. Right? The whole idea of running a release process like this is that I don't want, once I figure out how to do this, I want to make sure it happens every time. And while I can trust Steve most of the time, Friday night at 5 p.m., the day before Christmas, I don't trust Steve because he's busy and he's tired or he's got kids yelling at him or any other thing. So I'm trying to codify it in a way that's reliable with low risk, but lightweight, right? Like that's one thing I love about Azure DevOps. This is much simpler. If you've used Octopus Deploy, if you used Bamboo or something, all those systems work great. Jenkins works great. They're not as simple and easy to understand as this, right? Like even this view, like when they did this, I was like, oh, that's kind of silly. Like clearly we know how pipelines work, but this view of a pipeline, right, is vastly different than this view of a pipeline. And there's implications for us as database people. Like we know, right? Whoops, clicked the wrong thing. This could be a bad pipeline, because if I allow somebody to come down here before this is approved, because this is just a deployment, this isn't somebody looking at it, right? Potentially somebody just does this deployment without actually having checked. But in here, we would hope that before we come here, we let a QA person approve this to say, yeah, I got to know that the QA team actually signed off on this. So where I sell it is that this reduces the chances of mistakes and it reduces the time it takes for me to communicate what's going on to managers, project managers, developers, customers, anybody, because I can give people access to read-only access, right, for dashboards and things like that. So they can see if their work's getting done, which goes a long way with clients, honestly. All right. Yep. Let me pop down real quick. I'll show you test plans. They're in this deck, but there's not a lot in there, right, that we worry about. But test plans are really a way for me to set up tests that I want to follow. Okay. I could do these automated. They're kind of set up to really be manual steps, right? So if I open this test case up, right? So check database version, right? These steps in here, right? Log on to the instance, execute this. I should see this. Oops, I'm getting a little happy with my thing, but you get the idea. These are really built for manual QA departments or people that might have to do things. I can do some automation in here. And there are people that have some Selenium type executions. I haven't seen any clients use this for database testing specifically. They typically would do that as part of the CI run. But for QA groups that might want to do this, or maybe you have a smoke test in here that you say, I want the DBAs to follow this testing when we do a deployment. They can come in here and they can see what things they need to do. They could then say, well, for this one passed, right? This one failed. I want to check all of those. This one failed, and that way there's just some accountability to make sure that we followed steps. And for something like smoke tests, it might be like this, right? Like make sure it deployed, right? Log in, make sure the database server's up, run this stored procedure, make sure you get results. It could be simple things, but just having a checklist is important because it's not about me knowing how to do it. It's about the next person in line knowing how to do this stuff. They do, like I said, they do have some options here for some automated things that can happen, but they tend to be more for web software or desktop software that has some specific type of test runner that will actually go. So like I said, I haven't actually seen a database people use this, but it is available. Artifacts are for libraries of stuff. So they're essentially for feeds. So you might publish a feed out when you build a DLL, for example, a .NET thing, or a Python module, and then you connect the feeds to pull back in. So for a lot of companies like us at Redgate, we have certain components of software that we build that are shared amongst other pieces of software. So this is where we do the integration piece. Not really a database thing, but as you can see here, right, like Maven is common in the Linux world. NPM is Node package manager. So that's more for Node web JavaScript type stuff. NuGet is very Windows based, and Python is fairly recent from the Azure DevOps space, but allow you to get those packages and make them available inside your software development process. So developers don't have to know that I need to go get the feed from this URL in my file server. It's integrated into the software development process. Again, not so useful for databases, but fantastic for application software. All right, that's kind of a good overview of the online platform. The differences from the DevOps server, which is on-premises TFS, is you have to install it and support it. You pay for it differently. There are a few differences here that I've listed. Most of these are legacy-ish type things for those of you using TFS that might have done certain things. Maybe the big one is that I can use AAD online and only AD on premises. That may change soon, right? You may not care, because AAD really, for most of us, integrates our Active Directory as well. But there are a few differences. Just be aware it's not necessarily a seamless thing, even though it looks the same. It really does look the same. The summary really for me is that this is a complete software development toolkit, right? Even if you just have a hobby project and you just, even if you want to keep track of ideas, like you can just create these work items as ideas that I may do. It's just a way to keep everything together in one spot, as long as you're connected online, right? It's not offline, but I can write code offline, right? If I use Git, I can write code offline and have it run. The pipelines are fantastic that I can let this stuff run in a Microsoft space and I don't have to deal with it. And for most of us at the small level, we're not going to exceed the minutes per month. Not, if you're doing full-time work, maybe, but especially for hobby projects, you won't. For test projects, that kind of thing. For real work that's producing value, then you will, and you just pay for it. It's not a big deal. Okay? It's kind of a many to many thing. Like there's these groupings. I can have, multiple projects. I can have multiple repos in a project. I can have multiple pipelines or multiple releases, right? It's really like most of us would build a many-to-many table system. That's kind of what they've done in the background that links together all the pieces of work I need to do for software. So code, the builds, the work items, the releases, it's just all linked together. Okay? Lots of companies are using it. I think it's fast becoming the most popular platform worldwide. It just is. I mean, since they bought GitHub and they have GitHub Actions, which I think run very, very similar to the Azure DevOps thing, there's speculation it may overtake that. I just don't know, because the work items, all the stuff I think is a little bit smoother in Azure DevOps than it is in GitHub. And I use GitHub extensively. Like all of our Redgate stuff is in GitHub. I think the Azure DevOps stuff is a little smoother though overall. But in any case, you get started for free. So sign up, take your Microsoft account over there, create an organization and a project, and just play with it and see what works. If you want to experiment with how you build database software, if you want to see how the Redgate stuff works, if you want to see how, Quest or some other company, works, this is a great place to set up some of the automation, learn a little bit about it, and do it for free. You just play around with it. And then, if you find it valuable, talk to your company. They may see value in it as well. That's about it. There's my contact information again. I don't see any questions, Daniel. And if anybody else has any, I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, thanks a lot for having me, and hope everybody's safe and enjoying life.
Yeah, this was definitely insightful from at least in my perspective. I wish I worked in more clients that would do things like this as opposed to, hey, I copied your release out into the folder, go get it. It's like, oh gosh,
yeah,
is this the right one? Did you attach the right one to the email or the right one in the folder? What if they're different? Yeah.
All those things are reasons why having a process of some sort helps, right? Like using GitHub or Azure DevOps or whatever.
Right.
It makes a big difference. So anyways, hopefully I'll get out to Kansas City before you leave.
I hope so. Yeah. I'll hope on that. So if not, at least it'll be on a future pass at some point. Or
maybe I'll meet you in Singapore or something then.
There we go. All right.
Yeah.
Well.